Hello, my name's Mike Smoyer. I'm president at Digital Government Institute. Thank you for joining us today. Our topic is how to quantify ROI of your data, questions you need to ask. Our goal is to provide insight into the questions to ask to understand the value of data and related analytics. Often, these questions can provide insights into what's valuable and what might not be important at all. I hope you enjoy the program. Few quick housekeeping items. First, you can submit questions. We will address questions at the end of Mike's presentation. You can participate via the post-event survey. We'd love to have your input. In the handout section of the audience console is a copy of today's presentation. You're also eligible to receive 1 CPE credit. You need to be logged in for the entire program. You need to complete the post-event survey, and after doing that, my team and we confirm that, and we will email you a CPE certificate. And just a point of clarification, anyone logging in today, you will also receive an auto-generated certificate of completion. They're two different things. It's now my pleasure to introduce the other person you're looking at there on your screen. It's Mike Carley, the Federal Solutions Engineer of StreamSets. He is an experienced solution consultant for the public sector, skilled in solution selling, enterprise software and cloud technology, and he's also a veteran. And to all those people that served out there in the audience today, tomorrow is Veterans Day. On behalf of the DGI team, we appreciate your service, and 2 thumbs up, high five to everyone out there. The DGI team would like to welcome back Mike Carley. Take it away.
Oh, thank you very much, Mike. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this stuff. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I've had to learn a lot of this stuff the hard way. I've often spent many late nights trying to figure out why things are the way they are and why people make the decisions they do around data and analytics, especially when it's so powerful. So yeah, what I really want to do is I want to try and sidestep the conversation and kind of commercialization talks about speeds and feeds of different tools and stuff like that. It's really easy to get lost in the sauce of your different capabilities of your tools. And I just want to have a very philosophical discussion, a very pointed discussion about the organization of your data teams, the questions you need to ask about their work products, of how you obtain value. And really, because I'm a vet and I don't let the beard fool you, I'm still in. The bottom line up front really is, how do you know how much something should cost if you don't really know what it's worth? And AWS, Azure, any software vendor, they're more than happy to take your money. But really, because these tools are expensive and the analytics that you provide can be extraordinarily valuable, the question is really, what's the value of your work product that you're producing to the larger organization? All right, so who am I? Why you guys should listen to me or not listen to me, feel free. I do have a beard. So I started off the world in tech, at least in MicroStrategy. Funny enough, I actually, believe it or not, sold Yellow Page advertising. And this is after I got back from teaching English in China and stuff like that. But there was a period of time actually just before MicroStrategy where I sold Yellow Page advertising, and it was like working for, you guys are gonna laugh at me, but it was like working for Google in the sense that you had the physical version of Google. It was the phone book, and you would sell advertising into it. And basically, it sounds kind of silly, but the phone numbers in the ads in the phone book are actually not the business's real phone number. You might hear this little blurb that says like, oh, this call may be recorded for quality assurance purposes and stuff like that. Well, it turns out it's actually most likely being recorded every time. And it's not really so much for your quality assurance or even really the business's quality assurance, it's for the sales rep. And those calls, those recordings go back to the business owner, and we can prove back our value. And what Yellow Book and all the other Yellow Page advertisers do is they produce an analytic product for their sales reps. And they say, this is what this call was worth. You know, this is the time, the location, the recording of the call. This is what they discussed. And here's the complete list for the entire year. And we know that because we own the phone number in the ad in the phone book. And so that data product was essential to my success as a sales rep selling ads in the Yellow Pages, and it's essential to the sustainment of the Yellow Page industry as a whole. There's plenty to be said about that, don't get me wrong, But the thing is without that data product, I mean, it is critically important to why even yellow page advertising still exists today, with Google being as prevalent as it is. And MicroStrategy was really just an extension of that. So, we had charts and graphs. MicroStrategy sold the charts and graph software. And it was right around that time that I left and I enlisted in the Air Force to go get into the fight. So I was able to get on orders for Enduring Freedom. I moved over to Oracle after I learned that turns out there's databases underlying that kind of thing. So I wanted to learn more about that. And I went to work for Oracle Federal, did some work for state and local, did some work for the intelligence community and the DoD as part of my stint at Oracle. They actually put me back on military orders to do some modernization of intelligence systems over there too, which was an absolute blast. And so they sent me to places far and fun. And one of the fun places is the Nellis Petting Zoo. It's got all the Russian military hardware that you can kind of play around with, including RPGs. But don't let that fool you. You got Hind helicopters, you got Buck missile systems, you got BMPs, you got T-72s, you got everything. And then I did something silly, and I decided I wanted to become an officer and try and change things inside the military. So it was either up or out for me. And so I ended up becoming an officer, and now I am probably about 10 years in, and about 6 months away from making captain. So I've been in and around the data space for a while. Been doing both the engineering side and the sales side of both commercial stuff and a lot of public sector and federal work. So why StreamSets? So StreamSets is actually an amazing technology. The pedigree is probably even a little bit more interesting. Have you ever worked with Cloudera? Have you ever worked with Informatica? Basically, we are the brainchild of those two main organizations. The chief product officer at Informatica for 15 years is the CEO. The chief technology officer was the team lead who wrote Scoop and Flume and was one of the original Power Center developers. So, excuse me, we've been around for about, 8 years now. We were recently bought by Software AG this year for about 600 million. So that was nice to finally exit from the startup world, which was great. And so really the secret sauce of StreamSets is that you will find that when you're doing these integration projects, you will be responsible for integrating data that you don't own. And so you'll have to do either some type of data contract agreement or beg, borrowing, stealing, or you're going to be stuck redoing your work often because people change things and it breaks all the time. With StreamSets, we sidestep a lot of those problems that commonly bog data teams down. And really, we just do data pipeline software, and we do it really, really well. So, for example, the schema could change mid-flight in a streaming pipeline, and our pipeline doesn't break. And that's because our pipelines are schema on read, and we're one of the only vendors that does that in the industry. But let's talk about the source materials for the talk. Because really what I want to teach you guys from this talk is not so much about the capabilities of StreamSets, but really the capabilities of how you should be structuring your team and how you should be valuing the capabilities that you ultimately demonstrate back to the larger organization. So if you're wondering where this mismatch of all these different bits of information kind of come from, these are my source materials. If you want to go check these folks out. They all have unique and interesting things to say. Infonomics, Chris Berg and his talks about DataOps are awesome. Also, Ben Rogojan, Ethan Aaron, those are also great guys. Particularly Infonomics, I think, is a really useful place to start if you guys are looking to get started. It's a little light on technical detail if you come from an engineering background. But it's a fantastic place to start more generally about how to think about the value of information, because obviously it's worth different things to different people. But the engineering inputs, the cost basis for that can be also very different as well. I really love the fact that somebody summed it up really well, that all analytics projects kind of come down to like three things. You're either going to deliver insights, you're going to save some money, or you're going to make some money. And with public sector, I would argue that it's probably even two, maybe even one. So a lot of that is focused on saving money first, usually. And then the second is delivering insights. And the delivering insights, I think we do a pretty bad job on as a public sector community pricing appropriately. all the inputs associated with that. So let's talk about the big paradox that we all live in and have to deal with. And so the first one is that data teams are great at quantifying things, except for the impact of their analytic products. So they will sum and calculate millions of records like nobody's business, but they really have trouble saying, hey, yeah, my dashboard that I made you, that's worth $100,000, or hey, that's worth $1 million. Yeah, you absolutely should be thinking about it in terms of that when I go talk to you about budget and resources for next year. And so what this sounds like in the office is this paradox of people loving your work, but not wanting to give more resources to it. And so it sounds like, I love this report. Can this be real time instead of batch? You say, yeah, absolutely. We'd love to do something like that. We just need more money for budget, for tooling, or we need to hire some additional developers. And they say, oh, well, sorry, no, we can't do that. That's not in the budget. Or, hey, this work is great. This is amazing. I need another 5 dashboards just like this, but for these other regions or something like that. And you go, great, yeah, I just need another 5 developers, or I need some more tooling, or I need some more cloud resources. And they go, oh, sorry, we don't have it in the budget. So basically, they're telling you that your work is transformational. It's really important. But when it comes, excuse me, but when it comes to assigning more resources to that product, they go, no, sorry, that's not really in the cards. So there's kind of 3 big frameworks that I want you guys to kind of keep in your head when it comes to how the decision makers that you guys support, who are ultimately the sponsors of your products, how they measure your ROI without really maybe even telling you. And the first one is, how fast are the data-driven decisions being made from your analytics? So there's always a question of confidence in the analytic products. That's fine. We could talk about how to do that all day. That's basically built on a lot of testing. So you'll find that actually making the analytic product is not as important as making the tests and the SLAs and the instrumentation to support it. There's also another ROI framework of how other teams measure your ROI. So that's through budget allocation, that's through resources. They may not tell you per se what it's worth verbally or maybe overtly, but it absolutely gets shouted from the heavens when it comes to budget allocation or resource allocation for that particular year. And then finally, the one I really love and I think makes a lot of sense is actually what we call the DataOps approach. And that's measure everything like it's complex manufacturing. And so, we have lived in a technology age where we think what we're doing is special, it's bespoke, it's really unique. And I think the analytics industry is really on the precipice of realizing what they need to do is something more akin to complex manufacturing. So that's Kaizen, that's all the lean processes, that's Sigma 6, that's all that kind of stuff when it comes to your data and analytics supply chain. So let's go to the next slide. So the first question that you really want to ask yourself is, how do you see your data analytics team? And if you don't run a team and maybe you're a team of one, the question is, how do you see yourself? And so I'll tell you right now, in my experience, most people see themselves like Ron Swanson doing some woodworking. They see themselves as a craftsman, as building something bespoke and beautiful and comprehensive. And that's great. You should absolutely have that kind of pride in your work because your work does matter that much. And again, the other kind of corresponding feature to this is that the people who do this tend to think servers are pets. They are very bespoke things of creation. They write a lot of custom code. And that's all well and good, but that doesn't tend to scale very well. And so if we go back to that idea about complex manufacturing, I feel like the data analytics industry is in that place right now, just before the Model T came along. We are just before Henry Ford decided to build the assembly line. We are just on that precipice. And some of the best run organizations, data analytics wise, they don't think of themselves as a union of craftsmen working together on their own respective projects. They think of them as a fraternity of factory foremen. And they think servers are cattle. They think custom coding absolutely needs to be minimized. And if you do it, you need like an exception to policy. You need to have like three levels of approval, because there is a very high cost of ownership associated with custom code, and they don't want you to write it. And so what they're really focused on is cranking out a volume of analytic products and finding out ways to programmatically create them. So you see these, you start to see these a lot when people talk about doing self-service data or self-service analytics. That's really the kind of the most common genesis point for people who start to think about those ways. And that's really where the fraternity and factory foremen start to get really kind of get some power and some additional resources in the organization. But I'll tell you right now, a lot of people realize they probably shouldn't be doing as much custom bespoke coding, and they try and get to the factory level foreman, and they start to kind of fall somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. I don't know if you guys are fans of MASH or not, but I feel like this particular character in MASH really kind of summarizes it, where these poor folks, they're under-resourced, they're burnt out, but they're also experts, and they're absolutely capable. But they're put in really an impossible situation, and they end up having to do the data engineering or the analytics equivalent of meatball surgery, and they got to do it just to get by, because there's another 10 more products or whatever that they have to crank out. And so, they could crank those products out and go home after a 50, 60, 70-hour week, or they can try and make sustainable investments to try and get off that treadmill. But you're talking like a 90-hour or 100-hour week at that point to really do it right. So ask yourself, how do you see yourself, and where you kind of fit on that spectrum, and the other ways to get there closer to doing something more akin to complex manufacturing. So when you kind of figure out, or if you feel comfortable answering that question, the next thing to apply is what we call the DataOps valuation framework. And there's a couple of ways to kind of slice and dice it, and this is again cribbed from some of the folks listed in the source materials. But this is a really useful reference to think about the value of your analytic products. So the bowling pins, or the number of data people impacted by your work. And another one is the paper clips, are the measure of how much they're impacted by it. The dollar amount is the impact of the business. So, and then finally, the amount of the time you spend doing it. And if you want to replace the time value, you could replace the total cost input. So that's the cost of man hours, it's the cost of the software licenses, it's the cost of the cloud resources, it's the cost of everything, divided by the hours that you put into that analytic product. And this formula is a really good way of helping you approach your work with the right frame of mind, saying, hey, when you put in these inputs together, these are the outputs, much akin to raw materials and complex manufacturing. Raw materials come in at different points in this process, and these are the valuable subcomponents that we create from it. So a lot of people, I'll go back one slide real quick. A lot of people will say, yeah, that's great. How do I actually get people to tell me how much they're impacted from my work? How much are they, how do I know they're being honest? How do I know they know the full impact? All that stuff. Those are all completely valid questions. Sadly, a lot of this stuff is actually already told to you by the budget allocation and stuff like that, where they'll happily pay you lip service, but they won't increase your budget. So there's a couple of questions that we'll talk about later about how to ask that. So we'll cover the first part of the ROI, the number of people times the impact. So again, where we talk about the number of people impacted by your work and the measure of how much they're impacted by it. So the first kind of set of questions that will help you answer the first part of the ROI evaluation framework is, you almost have to put on like a sales rep hat on internally and say, like, I call this the internal sales method, is, would you be willing to pay $100,000 for this dashboard? No? Okay, cool. Then I'm going to take it away. And they go, oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that. It's really important. Okay. Well, then how much would you be willing to pay? I don't know, $500 a month? I don't know. What is it? And so you go, well, it's not really worth it to me. Or, well, you got to go talk to my boss, otherwise I'm going to close it down. And it's a little bit kind of a bit of a stick up model, but it really forces the question of like, look, you say this is important, but how much are you really willing to part with to actually put your money where your mouth is, so to speak? Um, so that's one way to do it. You guys know your situation way better than I do. So maybe you're equipped to do something like that. Maybe you're not. That's totally okay. There's other ways to discover, what the impact of your work is. So the other way to do it is the ticket fortress method. And that's basically saying, yeah, sure, we can do that. But before we start on this project, you need to fill out this 10-page proposal or however long the proposal is. And so you see a lot of um, forms in like Jira or Confluence pages that automatically get linked to Jira's or project documents and stuff like that. And basically, you are almost in a sense pulling teeth, where you have a bunch of mandatory fields in the form in the project proposal, and you are asking them very explicit questions, of which you will either reject or accept. And then when it comes time for your annual performance report, you are basically performing a roll up of all of those 10-page proposals. And so when it comes time for budget, you say, look, I have it signed in blood from, these 50 10-page proposals, saying this is the impact, ergo, you need to give me more resources next year. And if you doubt me, here's all 50 of the 10-page proposals. You can go through the 500 pages yourself. So that's one way. That's another way to do it. Again, typically you see this in a organization of a sufficient size, but the data and analytics team is of an interesting level of independence. Usually you see them reporting directly to like the CIO or something like that. And they're just kind of like on an island of misfit toys where they don't own any of the infrastructure, but they're responsible for getting analytics projects done. The other one is the executive sponsorship method. This is another good one if you have kind of the ear of the king, so to speak. Typically you see this not enacted so much on the golf course, but it's usually in very private, quiet conversations where it's like, look, you're asking for this. Is this from you or is this from your executive sponsor? And if this is from the executive sponsor, like, usually there's a bit of wheeling and dealing whereby they kind of fall back on the internal sales method. Yeah, that's just another way to kind of say like, hey, are you asking for this? Is your boss asking for this? And if it is the boss that's asking for this, what are they willing to spend? How important is this to them? It's often used in conjunction with other forms, but it's another good way to kind of filter and force the question: how many people are impacted by your work? What's the impact of it? Why are you asking for this, rather than this just being another Jira ticket that you have to go fix. The last one is the BWC method. It's probably my favorite. It definitely causes some fireworks. And one of the best ways to do the BWC method, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on these things, but it's called the bitch, whine, and complain method. And the basic question is if you turn off the data warehouse, do you know who would scream first? And that's really where you start to do like some A/B testing, and turning off various dashboards and analytic products at various times, and just wait for the nasty grams to roll in or the panic phone calls or whatever. Because if nobody's really responding to your emails, and you say, hey, we're thinking about turning this off, or we need to save some money or something like that, yeah, go ahead, let it run. Maybe that stuff will be turned off for 2-3 months, and then it'll come time for end of quarter roll-ups, and then somebody starts screaming. You don't really know, because the people who have been sponsoring and consuming your analytic products have never been giving you feedback. So you don't know what the impact of your work is. And so, yeah, you kind of have every right to turn it off if you don't know how important it is to the wider organization. In fact, it's probably good use of resources where if you don't have some type of impact documented somewhere, you should probably be turning off those analytic products, and you will find yourself kind of falling backwards into a BWC method. You can do this for a certain amount of time, until you accidentally turn off an executive stuff, an executive's dashboards or something like that. Usually you know what those are. But again, it gets you right back into the executive sponsorship method for determining your impact. And then you can roll through the other ones as well. And usually Hopefully, as an analytics person, you kind of realize you can be like the Better Call Saul of data engineers and start to do some wheeling and dealing internally for yourself, just to get the impact of what your work is. And again, like I cannot harp on this enough. Your time is so precious. It is so easy to get stuck down a rabbit hole when it comes to making these analytic products. It takes even months sometimes just to get the proper domain expertise to make the right analytic product. And if you don't know the impact of your analytic products, or it's not being recorded somewhere properly, you should not be delivering them. In fact, ask the question to your management if they're making you do this, and say, if I don't know the impact of the analytic that I'm delivering, why should I be delivering it to them? It's not recorded anywhere. This is a management nightmare just waiting to happen. So the second half of the ROI kind of formula that you can get yourself set up with is, if you know the impact of the business, you can then deduct the cost inputs. So the picture on the right is actually just a little compilated bar chart of the Samsung Galaxy S10. Samsung, when they go ahead and make a phone, they know all the cost inputs. Because guess what? Samsung does complex manufacturing. And so when it comes to the inputs of things like the display or the battery or the processor and all the other stuff, they know how much each one of those subcomponents costs. And you guys probably know this super well, but analytics is really a team sport. Right now, we're kind of forced to send emails and tickets back and forth to each other. But at its core, it really is a team sport. So not only should your inputs for whatever your responsibilities are on the analytic team be monitored as cost inputs, the tools you use, the man hours you spend on a particular project. I mean, you have a very specialized skill set. You have, in my opinion, you guys have billable hours no different than a lawyer. So you should know the cost per contract hour per person on the analytics team. I'm sure there's plenty of you guys on the analytics team who are salaried or are working, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, if not more. And so you should absolutely monitor the cost of your time inputs on these projects. If your management doesn't force you, you should start to do it yourself, because then you can know how many units of work are produced across the data analytics supply chain. Because here on the graph on the right, Samsung's just tracking the cost inputs for those particular parts. Each one of those parts has their own completely distinct and unique supply chain. And so it's no different than with analytic products. I mean, you got your own integrations, you got your own databases and datasets and dashboards and all that infrastructure that comes along with it. All of those inputs should be calculated down to the minute that you guys spend building these products. So that way, if you're really building this dashboard that takes hours for multiple team members to work on, that's really the most expensive dashboard in the organization, you should go back and tie it back to its impact. If not, let it go. The Google Site Reliability Engineering books are phenomenal on this subject. If you're looking for a great place to get started on how to broach data contracts and SLAs and SLIs and service level indicators and stuff like that, then absolutely start reading those books. That's a great way to it's a great template to start off of if you're already looking for another way to kind of follow these practices. The other things that you want to ask are, the infrastructure, the cloud costs, the software licenses, the man hours, that's all good. But have you priced in other stuff? Have you priced in the cost of third-party data? More importantly, have you priced in the cost of bad third-party data? Have you priced in the cost of fixing data that is not pursuant to the data contract? And do you have remediations inside that contract? If you do, great, you're way ahead of the game, but most people don't, and they deal with crappy data that breaks our pipelines, and then these poor people have to work on Saturdays, and it's frankly not fair to you guys. And so if you guys know the cost of third-party data or bad third-party data, then the business, honestly, it's probably going to start measuring you on what bad data costs in terms of dashboards or downtime or things like that, where basically the dashboards themselves will have an SLA, and there will be chargebacks associated with downtime with that dashboard. And frankly, that's kind of how we should all start thinking about ourselves as product owners, as providers of a service. So when it comes to what this looks like when the team gets together and has a meeting and works stuff out, and how we map personnel to different stages of the data supply chain. This is another thing that I borrowed from the source materials, and I think it's a fantastic example. The machine learning scientists, the data scientists, those are closest to the direct business impact. Those are great examples of people who sit really close to decision makers. That's all well and good, absolutely. I am closer to the data engineer on the other side of the spectrum. I am super far removed from business people, probably for the best. I'm super grumpy. I shouldn't say that. I'm like the IT equivalent of like the grumpy old guy who wears socks with sandals and kind of just lives in a closet with his red stapler. I vibe really hard with those people. I understand their pain very well. And so really what you're seeing here though is each role is living within its own environment. Each role is much in the same way like animals participate inside a larger ecosystem. It's the same thing here. And what you want is your staffing levels and your tooling and your budget allocation to live in harmony as best as possible. And much in the same way in the animal kingdom, where there's not necessarily a one-for-one relationship where there's one mosquito for every kangaroo or something like that, you'll start to see that the machine learning data scientists are maybe more common or less common based on the organization, how it's structured, and based on what's needed. But oftentimes, we are not taking a very comprehensive approach to the investment or the monitoring of the ROI at each stage of this particular data supply chain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and map the personas to the data supply chain and the potential ROI of how that helps. So much in the same way, the animal kingdom is this kind of pyramid with the apex predator. A lot of people look at machine learning scientists as kind of the apex predator of analytics. Like and there's super specialized ones. There's guys that just do there's guys and gals, sorry, that just do natural language processing. There's other ones that do just statistical work. I mean, it's crazy. It's hyper specialized, as well it should be. I mean, they are creating some amazing products. So in the public sector example, you have an ML specialist. They create this new machine learning model that discovers fraud to help kind of pre-flag transactions and procurements, or for example, to investigators. And of the investigations that they begin, the vignette generally goes that like, the ML is pretty good. And so when they have a human interaction or when they have a human intervention to start the investigation, they end up having really a paper case. And so 90% of the prosecutions really begin, and it increases the clearance rate of all the cases. The agency ends up collecting an extra $5 million because, again, what we're doing is we're trying to save money. And so we're trying to save money from the fraud, waste, and abuse that generally encourages. And so what happens when the agency gets that extra $5 million? I'm sure they have it palmed out and all this other stuff, but typically they don't put that money back into reinvesting with the machine learning scientists or the analytics team to produce more or better fraud models. They kind of use it to stabilize a legacy system or some other investment that doesn't go back to the ROI that generated it. Now, what if we move down to the analytics engineer? So the analytics engineer, let's say, for example, supports 5 data scientists or 5 machine learning scientists. And what they do is they create new models that allow for highly correlated fraud and waste indicators. So, they have multiple data sets. They're able to structure those data sets in various schemas and ontologies that allow the fraud investigators to dramatically increase. And not only do they tee up success for the data scientists, but they also tee up success for the people who are tracking wasteful spending as well. And so the agency, as the vignette goes, collects not just an initial $5 million, but they collect really a total of $10 million. And the agency's brilliance, again, they don't have it mapped or a complete understanding that the analytics engineer created an environment that is possible for the data scientists to be successful for not just fraud, but for also wasteful spending as well. And so they go hire 20 IBM consultants. And I'm sorry if you're from IBM, I don't mean to pick on you guys, but just looking for an example, they go ahead and hire 20 StreamSets engineers. Well, actually, that'd be a great investment, but I'll explain why in a second. But you get the point that it really goes back to legacy systems, buying new office space, stuff that doesn't really go back and complete the cycle, the positive reinforcement loop that you should probably be experiencing as an analytics engineer. Now, this is where StreamSets lives. StreamSets lives with the data engineers. I'm obviously super biased towards them. I feel they're paying a lot. I work with them all the time. I consider myself a data engineer to a certain extent, probably not as good as the data engineers I work with on a day-to-day basis, but I am of that ilk, so to speak. And so much in the same way the animal kingdom has an inverted pyramid, I personally believe the data engineer is the apex predator of the organization. But again, I'm super biased, and those are my people, and I try and defend them as much as I can. But the data scientist and the analytics engineer really depend on the data engineers to build data pipelines, to build the necessary integrations and translations between systems. And so the data engineer, one single data engineer, through their integrations, especially when they're programmatically built, can support dozens, if not hundreds, of analytics engineers. And the same thing with data scientists who are running various experiments and things of that sort. And so what you see typically in most organizations is the data engineers tend to be on the union of craftsmen. They tend to be the Ron Swansons of the IT world. That's fine, but the second you convert those people to think of themselves more as a factory of foremen, or a fraternity of factory foremen, then the productivity and the kind of pyramid inverses itself, and the data engineers end up becoming the most important people because they do so much enabling work. And without those people, if you cut those people sort of out of the ecosystem, then things start to fall apart really, really quickly. And so when you start to focus on using DataOps principles, tracking these ROIs, you can make the appropriate investments in the productivity of your data supply chain to really have more impactful outcomes. And so I personally believe that when you start to make investments in data engineering, automating that, increasing the productivity of those teams, you end up kind of fixing the rest of the ecosystem, because right now a lot of that stuff is done either through open source technologies, which are not great, or because AWS and a bunch of other guys have kind of sucked all the value out of the open source community. So the open source community doesn't do as much stuff as it used to. It's a very different place than it was 10 years ago. And so really, basically, if you're looking to make investments and apply DataOps principles, I think there's no better place than your data engineering team. And when you start to do that, you'll start to see very dramatic changes with how things kind of shake out. So how I think you guys should kind of think about this mixture of tooling and people and all sort of stuff. I'd be kind of remiss not to talk about StreamSets a little bit. These are the kind of options that people think are available to them, that you can basically do hand coding. You could use some open source stuff, maybe Logstash, Beats, maybe NiFi, something along those lines. Or you could buy really specific purpose-built tools. So you could do Fivetran, you could do Matillion, you could do Golden Gate, you could do, I don't know, IBM, because I've been picking on them. They have some data integration tools. That's all well and fine as long as your analytics use cases are super specific and tailored. Often they tend not to be. Like, often it starts super tailored and specific, don't get me wrong, but very quickly, once you've met those requirements, people start paying lip service. They say your work is great, and then they start giving you other use cases that these tools typically very quickly break down on. And so don't get me wrong, I think Cribble's a great tool, but I also think that you can't really use Cribble for real-time data replication for financial information from a bank or something along those lines. And really what you see is, again, much like the animals in the Galapagos Islands, they're highly specialized. and they tend not to scale across all the use cases your team is going to get thrown at you. And if you don't want to end up managing an entire stable of really diverse tools, then you kind of have to go for something that's a little bit more open, a little bit more flexible, and really something that's ultimately designed to live with DataOps principles in mind. And so I promise I won't push on StreamSets too hard. This is, if you want to go shopping for a tool and go pick a tool, there's plenty of them out there. I just think that your tooling that you pick should have the metadata exhaust that you need to orchestrate the ROI calculation for your efforts. And if you're going to start with your data engineering team, StreamSets, this is what it looks like. This is how we built StreamSets purposely with the instrumentation to make the data pipeline smart. So there's a bunch of other great features, like you can see here, like the performance donut, if you want to do some real-time tuning. There's a bunch of other features too about, how many records per second. From that instrumentation, you can then build things like service level agreements, living, breathing, real-time data contracts. You can then stack rank your developers by who makes the most pipelines, who moves the most records, who has the least amount of errors in their pipeline, all that kind of stuff. Those are the handles by which you really drive the organization forward. And so that's the stuff that I think is really going to be the future of how we monetize and calculate the ROI. Because when you do things like, go back one slide, because when you do things like hand coding, you typically build an integration that gets the data from A to B. And maybe when you use some open source stuff, you get the integration from A to B and maybe the total number of records that moved. But you don't get the other instrumentation that ties in with other systems like Jira or Confluence or whatever. They'll say, hey, boss, we moved 100,000 records. We noticed, though, that the original source had 200,000 records in it. We are automatically have created a remediation to start a Jira ticket to have a data engineer go investigate what went wrong. And with StreamSets, you can do that. And with that linkage, you actually get ahead of your SLAs, and you also are able to offer them at the same time. So that's kind of a bit of tying the SLA, SLI, kind of Google's SRE kind of conversation into it. But really what we're going to be doing is site reliability engineering for data. And that's whatever tool you pick should have these kind of basic capabilities in mind. And that's just kind of how I've seen it be really successful. One of our best public referenceable customers that we can talk about today is Advana. It stands for the Advanced Analytic Program for the DoD. This slide is actually a little bit old. I think we're up around 7,000 pipelines now. But basically, Congress required every government agency to undergo an audit, including the Department of Defense. They literally had an act of Congress done for them to get a waiver. And so they had a waiver for 20 years. And they said, and Congress finally said, no, it's time. You actually have to undergo a complete audit. And so there's over 3,000 master business systems of record inside the DoD. And you can imagine how much of a data integration, data engineering nightmare that would be if somebody changes a column name or changes a table name or changes a data type or anything in any one of those 3,000 master systems of record, each one of which probably has several thousand tables into it by itself. I mean, we're talking billions of records and terabytes, if not petabytes of data that StreamSets moves regularly. And as cool as that is, I think what's actually more important is that there's 70 different use case teams that use StreamSets every day. And more importantly, when it comes time to move and be agile and take discounts from the vendor industry when they offer them to you, we help the comptroller re-platform across on-prem and cloud and different data platforms 4 times within 18 months. And we did it flawlessly. And that's because we've also built in things like SDKs and testing frameworks that allow you to programmatically change the source and destination while keeping the internal logic of the records translation the same. And by doing these things with minimal interruption, we're able to basically have the audit pay for itself. And that's, over $250 million of savings for the military in terms of unaccounted property. But more importantly, I mean, you as a taxpayer now finally have a complete understanding of what you bought and paid for. It's not about tracking the aircraft carriers. It's about tracking the four tires on Ford Eustis, after the Humvee mechanic school gets out or something like that. Like, it's those little things that you want to start to track. And it turns out the DoD does, on the whole, a pretty good job. And the total value of those assets is about $2.8 trillion. So it's an incredibly large amount of financial data flowing through StreamSets. More importantly, now that Advana has the receipts, they are starting to step through everything. So now they're taking the money spent on, tanks and training and flying people away for TDIs, or sorry, TDYs, and measuring that against readiness and other performance data. So once you have the receipts for everything, you can start to calculate what you get for your money. And really, the comptroller's office and the Advana program is really becoming a project about, yes, the DoD has a large budget, but now we're actually building a real-time system for calculating return on investment for when it comes to our capabilities for force projection. And I think that is actually fundamentally going to change warfare, because if you know how much it costs to go into war and those capabilities to inside war, then you know how to create losing economic exchanges for your adversary. And you don't have to look any further than the Ukraine conflict to see drones dropping grenades inside of multi-million-dollar tanks. It's $1,000 drone, it's a $25 grenade, and it's knocking out $2 to $3 million worth of military equipment. If you're Ukraine, how do you not take that exchange, that economic exchange in warfare every day? And Advana is positioning itself to do that at a scale of $2.8 trillion in assets. So really what I want to leave you with is a series of questions to start to ask yourself, ask your teams, ask your organizations. When you adopt these DataOps principles, I want you to start thinking about, what is your mean time to detect data anomalies? When they're there, they're definitely out there. How long does it take you to find them? And if you don't find them, that should be your first question. If your customer finds them, that's a very serious quality problem that should be attacked. What is your mean time to recovery for those data anomalies? Have you designed programmatic remediation for those data anomalies? The next question that you need to ask yourself is, how many tests have you added to your CI/CD process this quarter? What you'll find is that the CI/CD process is a pain to implement. It's a bunch of technical debt. It's especially for an analytics process when you're building them for your data products. But what you will find is that the tests ultimately secure your flanks. The tests will make sure records in equals records out, all those other kinds of really basic things, but they will give you so much more confidence, and they will stop the fighting in the boardroom about whose data is right and all this other stuff. I mean, I start to get really, really despondent whenever I see, executives in a boardroom show up with their own Excel spreadsheets and they're going to argue. I was like, well, this is not going to be a productive meeting at all. And so basically those CI/CD tests are critical to moving that organization forward through the confidence in its data. The other thing that you should probably be tracking is how many self-service analytics products were created this month. I ask you, what's more important? Is it the thing, or is it the thing that makes the thing? So, people talk about first principles with Tesla all the time. Is the Tesla more important than the machine that makes the Tesla? I would argue the machine that makes the Tesla is more important than the Tesla itself. Well, the data pipelines you make are the thing that makes the data product. So what if I enable people to make their own data pipelines through self-service and make their own data products through self-service? Well, that's really important. That's a great way to move the organization forward. There's two other questions. What is the cycle time to create a new analytic product, and how long does it take for a new team member to contribute to the production environment? Those are questions that typically come from the software engineering world, but they have just the same kind of basis and importance as they do in data and analytics, because really I think of that as just an extension of the software engineering world. So there's a bunch of FANG companies that basically have a metric of how long it takes for somebody to onboard to make a commitment to the production code base. And you should do the same thing on your analytics team, because It's not about how amazing your product is. It's about how quickly you enable others to be successful. And these are the questions that I think are really key to ask yourself once you start to adopt DataOps principles. And you'll find that, I don't want you guys to think that everybody immediately goes to the top. Like, I mean, everybody just switches over and it just changes overnight. It's a multi-month, it's a multi-year process of discipline, of consistently changing your point of reference as to what's important. And I really want you guys to think about, the questions that I gave you to calculate your ROI. That'll be the ammunition with which you can approach the rigor internally to your own organization. And much in the same way that people kind of climb Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there is a similar kind of pyramid that you will have to climb when it comes to data ops. So, the first question for, at the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is like, do you have food? Are you safe? Are you rested? The same thing for your data products. Do you have them? Are they complete? Are they descriptive? Do they have everything the person needs? And then it gets to safety and other belonging needs. And you can say, like, are they instrumented? Do they come with SLAs? Do I know the ROI of the data product? And these are all things that kind of help you climb to the point of self-actualization where you can start talking about, mean time to detection and mean time to recovery. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and kind of wrap it up. That's all I have for today. So we'll go ahead and kind of conclude with questions. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really, really appreciate it.
We have about 7 minutes before the top of the hour, but if anyone wanted to get in touch with you, Mike, I didn't see any contact information. Should I just tell the audience to submit a question and say, hey, I'd like Mike to follow up with me, or how would you like to handle that?
Yeah, submit a question in the chat, or you can just hit me up. My email is mike@streamsets.com. So it's MIKE at StreamSets.
The first question from the audience was, are these numbers, or the numbers you shared today in the presentation, they wanted to know, are those real, or are they from actual use cases?
Can I ask a clarifying question, I guess? Which one?
I wouldn't know. It was just, are these numbers fictitious, or are they actual in use? And I'll send you the person's name for follow-up.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I can tell you with the comptroller, those are very real numbers. That is a very real customer.
Okay, I just got it. It was the ROI fraud detectors.
Oh, yeah. No. That's just a vignette. That's just a story, basically. But we do fraud detection in the commercial and financial spaces. So if they want real measurable numbers from our commercial customers like Greek Central, or in the banks we work with, like the Royal Bank of Scotland or something like that, I'm more than happy to put you in touch with those customers, and you can get the numbers directly from them.
Okay, we have 2 more questions before we wrap it up. And it says, what existing customers do you think represent the pinnacle of data ops maturity? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, there definitely is. So on the commercial side, the pinnacle is, in my opinion, is GlaxoSmithKline. They run about 1 million to 2 million data pipelines that are dynamically created, programmatically created every day. They combine basically a web crawler to fill a data lake. And then from that data lake, because the web crawler creates this metadata repository, they also use the metadata repository created by the web crawler to basically build a self-service layer for their data scientists and the researchers and stuff like that. It's been incredibly successful. They've shortened drug discovery time by years. So that's on the commercial side. On the public sector side, I'd say our work with the DIA and their common data fabric, it's coming along pretty fast. It's maturing very fast. The rate of iteration and maturity that they're going through, I could very well see them approaching GlaxoSmithKline levels in maybe another year or two. And that's just because they're monitoring and measuring the right things. They have incentive programs for their contractors set up in the right way, where data engineers, data scientists, they're all getting bonuses based on their data products and how well they're being used. So it's just the incentive structure is fundamentally different. And you start to see that because they're tracking the ROI of the stuff the right way, in my opinion.
Okay, final question. is there a way to programmatically scale the creation of pipelines and integration tests?
Yes, yes, you absolutely should. For every integration, you should probably have 2, 3, 4 times as many tests to guarantee the validity of that data. First of all, StreamSets has its own way of doing it. I'm just going to speak to that, but there's multiple ways to do it. You could do it through Jenkins, you could do it through however you want to do it. Chris Berg has some great stuff. But yeah, StreamSets has an SDK that allows you to programmatically create pipelines. If you know Python, you have the ability to programmatically create pipelines inside StreamSets. So that's all well and good. Where things really start to take off is through the testing framework. And so what we do is we use the testing framework as kind of the middle layer in a CI/CD framework before a pipeline goes into production. And you write tests for known outcomes or flexibility or functionality of a pipeline. And so what the testing framework will do is it will take your pipeline and it will put it under stress test. It'll use sample data sets. It'll dynamically create containerized origins and destinations. So, let's say you have, let's say you're, for example, the comptroller, and you have 7,000 pipelines and you need to migrate from, Cloudera to Databricks or something like that. Well, the SDK can programmatically change all those pipelines for you, but then you also need to write tests to make sure that A still equals B. And so the testing framework will programmatically test those 7,000 pipelines to make sure that A still equals B.
Well, the DGI team would like to thank Mike for joining us today, StreamSets and Software AG, and congratulations for the recent acquisition that you mentioned during your presentation. I'd also like to thank the audience for tuning in. We very much appreciate your continued support. On behalf of the Digital Government Institute team, this concludes today's program. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you very much.